Welcome to 908 ENT, the podcast. I'm your host, Sal Liberato. We're here to help you take another step towards success. Now let's get ready to learn the basics from the best. What's going on, everyone? Thank you for tuning back into another episode. This week, our special guest is Pat Natale. Pat, thank you for coming on today.
Thanks, Al. It's good to see you, and appreciate you inviting me to be on.
You got it. So Pat is the managing director at Morgan Stanley, which is a global financial services company that advises, originates, trades, and manages capital for government institutions and individuals. He also has been at the firm for over 30 years. He's currently the head of equities for wealth management. But, this is all public info. Anybody can Google you. What would you really like our listeners to know about you?
Well, listen, I'm born and bred in New Jersey, grew up in Summit. We went to the same high school, you and I, Sal. I'm a couple years older than you are. I currently live in Madison with my wife of over 20 years. I've got 2 teenage sons and a 5-year-old dog. And, I love to coach and mentor, and maybe some of that will come out, during the course of our conversation today. I've coached youth football in Summit. I've coached high school football at Mountain Lakes High School, where a good buddy of mine is the head coach. And then I try and coach the folks on my team. So coaching, mentoring are things that are really important to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. So just to get started off, I always like to ask everybody, what are the 3 simplest things that lead to success?
The 3 simplest things, Sal. I like to talk, and you'll hear this throughout. Like I'll use some some acronyms on things,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd say I'll call them the 3 C's in here right now. The first one being consistent attitude and effort. I have this saying. I didn't invent it, but I have this saying called "Win the Day." And I think, it means about, focusing on the here and now and what you're trying to do. But, I think success really comes from, persistent, dedicated, work towards one's goals. The second C is what I'll call continuous learning. I think having a growth mindset is critical. And I've listened to some of your past shows, Sal, and I think, you've had some great guests on, and I feel like that's been a message that's come across from some of the others as well. The world is changing, technology is changing, people are changing, and I think you have to change as well. So embracing new knowledge or new skills, to help you adapt and stay ahead is really important. And then the last C I'd call effective communication. My boss likes to talk about dynamic communication, the ability to sort of shift how you talk to different types of people. But I saw a stat recently that said, 70% of company errors are a result of poor communication. So, having the ability to get across your ideas in a, succinct and efficient manner, I think are keys to one's success.
Yeah, definitely. The consistency definitely is big, though. I feel like a lot of people do preach that as well, along with the growth mindset, like you said. So can you share a moment or experience that inspired you to pursue your career?
Yeah. I don't think anyone wakes up in the morning and says they want to be the head of equities for, Morgan Stanley Wealth Management. I think, maybe I wanted to, play center field for the Yankees, but sadly I wasn't a very good baseball player, but growing up in Summit, as I had mentioned before, I went to school with a number of folks whose parents, worked on Wall Street. Mine didn't. My family owns a bakery. Unfortunately, I'm not much of a cook. I tend to burn a lot of things, so they steered me away from the bakery business. The 1987 stock market crash happened in the fall of my senior year in high school. And while I didn't have any investments at the time, I was really fascinated by what had happened. Our high school, again, Summit High, where you and I both went, had a stock market club. I didn't know much about it at the time. I joined it. I actually remember pitching, Coors Brewing Company, because I think it was cool to pitch an alcoholic beverage company. I don't recall the valuation or really the investment thesis, but I kind of got hooked on the markets, after that.
That's awesome. So can you share a valuable lesson that you learned from kind of when you decided to get interested in that in high school and then to where you are now?
Yeah, we've been going through our what we call 360 review process, which is our year-end process at Morgan Stanley. And I really can't stress enough, Sal, how I think important it is to give, receive, and really accept feedback. Um, I'll be honest with you, I went through sort of a challenging time at work after Smith Barney, which is the firm I started with, merged into Morgan Stanley, following the financial crisis. I had lost my title. My job got moved up to Westchester from Lower Manhattan. I had a new manager. I get it, like sort of boo hoo hoo,
Yeah.
for first world problems for me. And anyway, I thought I was doing fine until I had my year end review with my new manager. And, he said to me, "Hey, Pat, everyone's on a list. Everyone's on a list for compensation, for promotion, and for termination." And I'll be honest, he kind of let that one hang out
Wow.
there. And he said to me, "You've gone from the A team to a role player on the end of the bench." Now that's, I don't think anything, anyone wants to hear. He said he expects
Yeah.
more from me. I need to take more of a leadership role. And he ticked off like a number of different deficiencies that I had, and, challenged me to hit the reset button and reinvent myself. I must admit, I think I was 42 at the time, hitting the reset button and reinventing yourself at 42 is not easy to do.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, Sal, my initial reaction was I thought what he said was unfair. I didn't agree with any of his critiques. Between you and I thought I was getting fired, right?
Yeah.
But I took some time to process, which I think is important. I read my notes from our meeting like over the weekend and honestly recognized he made a couple good points. I think he could have been a little nicer in his delivery. He didn't need to tell me I was, on the end of the bench.
Yeah.
But in all honesty, he actually told me exactly what I needed to hear.
Yeah.
Maybe if he sugarcoated it, I may not have responded. So listen, not everyone I think is willing to accept feedback that they receive. I was in that moment, and luckily for me, Sal, I was able to make some necessary changes, all things that were within my power, and I guess to make it easy for people to understand, I was coachable, right?
Yeah. But I was just going to talk about that, how it leads like into sports as well, because that's all about feedback as well. So if you
Yeah.
take the feedback, all right, you're going to improve. If you don't, then it's like, all right, you're going to stay the same or you could get worse.
And one thing I'll
I mean,
add to
easier
that,
said than done, obviously, but
100%. One of the things, and I think it's great in sports, and it's a good analogy you brought up, is the fact that there's a trust, and there's a trust between the player and the coach, right?
yeah.
You at least you assume there is, and you hope there is. And as a coach, you have to build up that trust so that I know, or as a manager now, when I'm delivering the feedback, and let's even say it's harsh or difficult, that I'm not just yelling at you as a coach to yell at you. I mean, some
Hmm.
coaches do that, right? But the
Yeah.
good coaches, like your dad, right, are gonna give feedback because they want you to do more. They expect you to do more. They need you to do more because you're a critical part of the overall team, and they see greater potential in you.
Yeah. 100%. And they're just not there to give you a hard time either.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, some are.
Yeah. But like you said, the good ones are really not.
Correct.
Yeah. So can you give a favorite quote, motto, mantra, like anything you use, like personally or kind of with the firm?
Yeah, yeah. So listen, I already mentioned, win the day, which to
Hmm.
me means, to be present, to focus on the here and now. And, anyone who's, on my Instagram account knows I mention win the day a lot. My team at work knows it. I sign off most of my emails with it. And, I used to help out Coach Fusco at Mountain Lakes. He was a high school buddy of mine. Big congrats to him and his staff and their
Hmm.
team on their Group One championship recently. But
Yeah, definitely.
I helped him out for a number of years. I was, the get back coach, kept people on the sidelines, but I was also their huddle coordinator. So I helped, coordinate like analyzing, capturing film and data. Anyway, I tried to bring that win the day philosophy to the Mountain Lakes herd. The other thing I like to talk about, which is probably my favorite quote of all time, is this quote called the Stonecutters Credo. You can Google it, you can look it up. It's by this social reformer named Jacob Riis, and it goes like this: when nothing seems to help, I go look at a stonecutter hammering away at his rock, perhaps 100 times without as much as a crack showing in it. Yet at the 101st blow, it will split in two. And I know that it wasn't that blow, but the ones that had gone before it. And I use that quote, and I actually came across that quote in the time after that challenging year-end review I just talked about. And I think it's a perfect quote for almost any situation in life, especially when you're having, a little bit of a challenge. And I think there's a number of lessons that I like to point to. The first lesson, and I'll call them the 7 Ps. I told you earlier, it makes me remember easily. The first P is patient. The first P is patience, right? You can't get discouraged when your rock, whatever that rock is, your career, a relationship, a new job, you're playing on a sports team, you're trying to be a starter, whatever that is, the rock, doesn't crack for you. So don't get discouraged. The second P is persistence, right? You have to hit the rock over and over and over again. It's not going to crack on its own. And I'm wearing I went to Rutgers University. I'll give a shout out to Coach Schiano, and he talks a lot about chop.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the same. It's kind of the same thing. He's talking about chopping down trees. I'm talking about splitting rocks. The next P I'll call is your purpose, which is, why are you hitting the rock? Let's be honest. Things that are worthwhile, you're willing to be patient or get up early in the morning and put in the extra effort. If you don't have a purpose, if it's not a passion of yours, you might not be.
Mm-hmm.
The next couple P's, I call one the process. How are you hitting the rock? Do you need a bigger hammer? Do you need to swing harder? Do you need to hit it from a different angle? All that being, sort of analogous to your skill set. So going back to my growth mindset comment, earlier, do you need to improve on something? The next P, and maybe this goes a little bit back to patience as well, but I call this one perspective. And I say this, Sal, because I feel when I talk to folks, especially young people, everyone is so far focused on the finish line and how far they have to go somewhere that they lose sight of actually how far they've come. Mm-hmm. And if you turned around and looked at the starting line, you'd realize, wow, you've come a really long way. And what I would tell people is, go look in the corner of your bedroom or your office or whatever. And I bet you if you look in that corner, you'll find a whole bunch of rocks that are split in two that you've cracked over the course of your life. And if looking at those rocks and reflecting on that past success helps you in the current moment when maybe you're struggling a little bit, hopefully that gives you the added incentive to take it to the finish line. And then the last 2 Ps, one is perseverance, right? Congrats, mm-hmm. You got through everything and you cracked the rock. That's the good news. The bad news is go find another rock. But the last one, which is probably as equally as important as any of them, is pivot, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe this isn't your rock, Sal. Maybe you need to think about doing something different. If you don't have a purpose or you're not willing to be persistent or patient or all those other Ps, maybe it's time to pivot and move into, into a different direction.
Yeah, no, that's great. I feel like that could be applied to anybody, any industry, anything. That's awesome though. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Thanks.
Yeah, 100%. We could just do a segment just on that in a podcast.
I think so. Yeah. It'll be my TED talk on the Stonecutters Credo.
Yeah, there you go. So bringing us to our next question. Everybody loves this one. So does hard work beat talent or does talent beat hard work?
So
as you know, there is a saying, but I left the end off just to kind of leave it open-ended for people.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And, I thought a lot about this, not to let people in on like the sausage making. Sal did share some of these questions with me beforehand. So I had time to prepare. This is not all off the top of my head. I think this is a little bit of a cop out on my part. To your point, I think most people say, talent beats, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work. But, I really think both of them, kind of complement each other. And I'll go back to something I said at the very beginning about sort of consistent effort, really being the key to long-term success. I think talent provides people with a bit of a head start. Let's be honest. It helps mm-hmm. if you have talent.
Yeah.
It's like Michelangelo's, he starts with a good block of marble. He doesn't make the marble himself, but really that sort of sustained, hard work, I think is really what ultimately, propels people to success.
Yeah, definitely. But like you said, you got to have a little bit of a combo of both.
Yeah. Yes. I mean,
I mean, at the
listen,
end of the day, yeah.
I could, run as much as I want. I'm just not going to be faster than Usain Bolt, right?
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. So, what do you think the best way to overcome an obstacle setback is? Whether that's like personally or kind of what you use with the people in the firm that work underneath you.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, listen, I think the most critical trait that anyone needs to have is just resilience. And listen, I talked about it a little bit in all the
Mm-hmm.
Stonecutter Credo comments. I talked about it a little bit in the difficult year-end review. I'll bet most people are familiar with that, Mike Tyson quote, which is, everyone's got a plan until they get, punched
Yeah.
in the mouth. We can all relate to it because people's life, people's career, all of it is unpredictable. And I think that quote reminds us to be prepared for the unexpected, at least the best,
Mm-hmm.
that we can, and sort of stay resilient, in the face of any of that, in that adversity. I think it's important to acknowledge the reality or the setback that you're in. Again, think back to my year-end review comments. Learn from it, be flexible, and then adjust your plan accordingly. I mean, you played football at a high level, playing in college. Sal, both your father and your brother are high school football coaches. Sometimes you're losing the game
Yeah.
at halftime, and you go into the locker room, you regroup, you make some adjustments that you think are going to work in the second half, and you go out there and you try and execute it. So, not to be too cliche on it, but I'm a
Yeah. No,
cliche kind of guy.
no, it's true though. You're right. So, what's more important, passion or motivation?
Uh, Another good one. I mean, I think they're intertwined and important in their own ways and serve different roles. I mean, to me, I think the passion is the love, the emotion you have for something, the enthusiasm you have. It's sort of burning within, and
Mm-hmm.
and like the motivations, that sort of external spark, or it could be internal,
Yep.
that prompts you to take action. Again, I think both are really critical, but I'd say you know passion kind of sets the direction, and motivation propels one along the journey. I mean, I think if you pressed me, I'd say passion is longer learning, and maybe that's the more important one. But I do love, motivational quotes and videos.
Mm-hmm.
Who's better than David Goggins,
Yep.
right? And it gets me fired up. But again, I'll go back to playing football, right? Think about the pregame speech, and the coach fires everybody up, and you go sort of running out the tunnel, and you line up for the kickoff, and everyone's fired up, and maybe you make that first tackle. It's tough to sustain that level of motivation for the whole game. You
Mm-hmm.
need to have like your purpose. We'll call that your passion. You need to have your purpose of like what you're trying to achieve in order to play those 60 minutes of the game to be successful. At least I think.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, it's definitely like a combo. But that's why they're good questions, because
Yeah,
there's no one answer, and like everybody has a different answer. It's literally this or
absolutely.
that, and everybody, not one person has had the same thing, which is definitely
Which
neat.
is which isn't that the beauty of life, right? So many people think, what is the answer to things, and it's whatever works for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And whatever drives. Like if someone else out there thinks motivation is more important, God bless them, and
Yep.
then they should stay motivated, right?
Yeah, 100%. So how do you continue to stay updated and learn, whether that's like with books, trainings, podcasts, events, kind of networking things? What are you guys kind of doing, or you personally?
Yeah. Well, listen, I mentioned earlier about sort of the growth mindset. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
important to be, committed to learning. I'll tell you what I do before before what I do. I challenge like my summer interns every year to something called hashtag TIL, or Today I Learned, which I ask
Okay.
them to write down everything that they've learned that day, and then we get together and discuss it at the end of the week. And I think it's important because it allows me to engage with them weekly and, sort of measure or evaluate their progress. For them, I think it allows them an opportunity to, sort of chart their growth, every week, the things they learned. And then lastly, like if they run into those challenges, right? I made the comment about look in the corner of your room at all the rocks. The same thing happens here, right? They can look at all the things that they've learned over the course of the summer and, how much they've grown, how much they've developed, how far they've come from the starting line. And, hopefully that gives them added confidence to tackle the next challenge. For me personally, the role I'm in is what we call like a markets facing role. So it's, super important to stay informed and up to date on current economic and business news. I try and do that by reading, various market publications like, Bloomberg to really stay on top of the news and what's happening. I'm a huge podcast fan, which is why I was really excited when you asked me to be on. So thank you for that. I listen to a number of podcasts. The Daily from the New York Times, I like. Bloomberg's Business Week is one I listen to frequently. Morgan Stanley, we have our own internal, or it's external. You can get it on any podcast network. It's called On the Markets. And of course the 908 ENT podcast is a favorite of mine as well now.
That's awesome. So just a quick question. Any tips or kind of insight you would give to somebody that's maybe looking to get into the financial field, whether they're just starting out or they're maybe trying to make a switch that's listening to this?
Yeah.
Maybe like a first step or just like something small they can maybe do.
Sure. I think it's important to have a passion for the markets or to be up to date on the markets, because anyone you're competing with in this market is, has already done that. So, there's a great email newsletter called The Morning Brew. It was founded by these guys from the University of Michigan, talks about world events, market moving events. I mean, just to kind of stay up on things. But again, I would subscribe to various like free newsletters from, Bloomberg or the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, where you can stay current on what's happening. You should sort of understand like, where's the market trading, the S&P 500 or the 10-year treasury, like those type of things are important because if you come in on an interview, your job may not be exactly related to what the market's going to do today or tomorrow. But, having that interest in the markets, I think is an important skill set.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. So
Sure.
as we come to a close here, what would be one final piece of advice you would give our listeners to help them take another step towards success?
Yeah, well, listen, I already talked about, continuous learning, and I think success is really a journey, not a destination. So I would encourage people to stay curious and open to new ideas. I'd challenge people to step out of their comfort zone. I think growth can happen, really when you push yourself outside your boundaries. I think success is also not a solitary pursuit. So collaborate with other people, share your insights, build meaningful connections, surround yourself with, a network of mentors or colleagues or people who inspire or challenge you. And then lastly, as I had talked earlier, it's not without its challenges. So, bring the ability to navigate through the journey. So, keep learning, stay connected, and persevere would be my sort of final words of advice.
Yeah, that's awesome. And like I said, I feel like anybody can use that advice, and then anything that you kind of said throughout this whole podcast, I feel like can apply to anything personal, any business, sports. So it's definitely been great. Yeah. Thank you.
So you're welcome. Well, thanks for having me. This was fun for me.
You got it. So anybody, feel free to reach out if you have any questions or like to connect. And then Pat, what's the best way if somebody wants to connect with you?
Probably LinkedIn. I mean, if you want to keep it professional, over LinkedIn.
Yeah,
but,
definitely.
I have a Facebook page, Patrick Natale, Natale is my name, all one word for Facebook or LinkedIn. But probably like professionally wise, LinkedIn would be the best source.
Yeah, and then I'll put your profile link in the show notes so everybody can get it.
Sounds good. All right.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Pat.
All right. Well, listen, Sal, thanks for having me. Happy holidays to you and the fam, and all the best to you.
Same to you.